Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Lisa Lang, and in this presentation I'm going to tell you the story of over 400 custom manufacturers, 442 job shops to be exact, applying just a little theory of constraints. I'll review the results achieved and the lessons learned. Most TOC success stories are not from companies holistically implementing TOC, and this story is no different. These 400 manufacturers implemented in just their operations. They focused with single-minded determination on flow. There was no consultant camped in their conference room. There was no buy-in process before implementing. No software was used. The results are nothing short of impressive. So let's jump in. In November of 2007, I got a call from Ricky. Ricky's shop was really struggling, and he wasn't sure that they would make it to the end of the year. He had read the goal and was getting my newsletter, but did not know what to do. Ricky said he needed help, but couldn't afford it. So I said, I'll make you a deal. I will tell you exactly what to go do. If you do it, you can call me back, and I'll tell you what to do next. If you don't do it, don't call me back. Ricky called back about 3 weeks later. I gave him the next step, and by the end of the year, he had added $900,000 to his bottom line. And that was the beginning. One of the reasons I offered to help Ricky was to test my idea of helping custom job shops and machine shops via an online coaching program. I had met so many managers and owners who had read the goal but did not know how to apply it. So I developed and launched a formal version of what Ricky went through that rolled out in January of 2008. And since then, there have been over 400 custom job shops that have completed the step-by-step coaching program. Let me explain what I mean by job shop. A job shop is a custom manufacturer where the constraint can move based on the volume and mix of work. Mix changes are common and the work is diverse. Many shops are low volume, high mix, but larger volume jobs may also run on occasion, or they may even make some prototypes. Jobs are typically made to order, but there are some job shops that may make a part or an assembly to stock in addition to the custom make to order parts they run. Some shops might have a few make to stock parts or make to stock an assembly or a subassembly. While producing new custom jobs is the norm, some shops will do repair work. It may be a small amount or most of the work they do, like in maintenance, repair, and overhaul shops. Shops may do some amount of work on-site repairs or installation. This means that the amount of capacity in the shop fluctuates. Emergencies and rush orders can be fairly common and can take a fair amount of capacity, like 2 to 30%, and be very disruptive. Setup times can also vary, and some setups can take a substantial amount of time while others take very little time. And what's worse, like many of the items listed here that we're going through, both or all scenarios can occur in the same shop at the same time. The high mix, low volume nature of a custom job shops leads to a mix of jobs with all different quoted lead times. The touch time to complete a job can also vary wildly. The same shop can have very short touch times and very long touch time jobs and everything in between. Due to the precision and or tolerance requirements, certain jobs have to run on particular machines, adding even more complexity. And if those weren't enough challenges, some jobs have outside processing to be done and some don't. Some have more than one outside process to be done. The lead time on necessary outside processes will vary by the process, and the vendors do not always deliver when promised. So job shops are not making millions and millions of the same thing. They make parts as small as your fingertip to assemblies the size of a house and everything in between. Job shops are complex. So how do you help very complex, very diverse companies get lasting results fast? Number one, you add a little theory of constraints, but you simplify it by focusing on flow. This single, very directed focus on the few right actions can generate results fast. Number two, you simplify implementation. No time is spent getting alignment and buy-in for a couple reasons. It's difficult to really buy into something that you don't fully understand until you do it. And buy-in will be achieved when they experience their own results. And if results happen quickly, a long buy-in process is not needed. What is needed is action. The question for participants is not, do you buy in or do you agree? The question is, are you willing to take action? I require each company's team to commit that they will take action. They must be willing to do each step of the process. Further simplification is achieved by not using software. We do not spend weeks or months setting up software, entering parameters, and inputting all the data software needs. The 400 plus job shops went step by step through a 14-week go and do online coaching program. They were given one step at a time. They go and take action. Then in weekly coaching sessions, questions were answered, solutions were customized, feedback was provided, and the results were reviewed. The third piece necessary to help very complex, very diverse companies get lasting results fast is to make it stick. The implementation will stick and results will sustain if the solution was customized for the shop. Off-the-shelf TOC is a challenge for these really diverse environments, so customization is key. Making the solution visual also helps. The idea is that everyone knows what to do next. Then a few key measurements make sure that flow continues to improve and any issues or disruptions to flow are quickly spotted and reduced or resolved. Once the basics are working and flow is improving, you can build on these results. The first steps of implementation not only increase flow, but reduce variability and improve predictability. This means that planning and predicting load versus capacity is much easier. The 400 plus job shops that have implemented have a diverse range in starting conditions. Some were detail scheduling every job on every machine, some had no schedule at all, and everything in between. Their on-time delivery ranged from 20% to 95% at the start, and some didn't measure it at all. Most started in the 50 to 85% range. Lead times for jobs ranged from 2 hours to over 2 years. Annual sales of these shops range from $500,000 to over $500 million, but most had annual revenues of $3 to $25 million. Profitability for these shops ranged from losing money to as much as 10% return on sales when they started. The data is from 442 shops all over the world. 267 had no starting data. Their data collection started mid-implementation, about 7 weeks into their implementation. This, of course, dampens their results. If they only start measuring once they've started improving, the effect is lessened slightly. 176 had starting data. Not all shops had all data. The analysis was done using percent mean increase or reduction, like the 1999 study of almost 100 manufacturing success stories published by Vicki Mabin and Steve Boulderstone. Lead time is a measure of physical flow. We measured the elapsed time from the start to the finish of a job. Again, the starting condition for these shops ranged from not measured, or those that had a measure, from 2 hours to over 2 years. Over the years, we've learned to look for patterns relative to the job size. For example, do smaller jobs tend to linger around too long? This can lead us to find other opportunities to improve flow. We also look for the correlation relative to the job size. Smaller jobs should have a shorter lead time than longer jobs, and if they don't, again, there could be opportunities to improve flow. Now let's take a look at some graphs. These are the actual graphs from some of the 442 shops. I've added the starting point, the historical average, if it was known and not already on the graph. In this upper left here, you can see an improvement, or actually a reduction in lead time of about 83%. And this one, a reduction in the lead time of 84%. This one had a reduction in lead time of 50%. And this one had a reduction in lead time in addition to the reduction in variability of the lead time of 31%. This one showed a reduction of lead time of about 48%. In this case, we did not have any data before starting the implementation. This one had an improvement of about 99%, so a 99% reduction in lead time, and again, no starting data. And this is an example of the correlation that I talked about, looking at it by job size, so the hours of the job versus the lead time, and the correlation through the course of the implementation gets better as things get more and more predictable. In this example, there was an 83% reduction in the lead time, and this one 77%. Now let's take a look at some other metrics. Productivity is the result of better flow. As a reminder, the starting condition for productivity was from not measured, or from 12 to 62% for those shops that measured productivity or had some historical data. We looked at daily, weekly, and monthly productivity in most cases. Of course, the monthly is less variable typically than the daily or weekly. Looking at daily and weekly allows us to identify profiles that might indicate opportunities for further flow improvement. Some of these shops were growing and hiring people, and others had issues with people showing up for work. So we normalized the data with what we call clocked hours, which are the hours that people actually worked. So here are some productivity graphs. Most of these graphs are either daily or weekly. Since measurements didn't typically start until around week 7, only some of the shops were tracking monthly before the end of the program. You'll notice a few of the graphs are not normalized with clocked hours. That could be because they felt that their clocked hours were pretty stable, or because they did not have an easy way to access the data. So let's take a look at some of these graphs. The red bar are the clocked hours here. You can see it trending down, and then the blue bars are the hours completed, and the dotted lines in each case are the trend line. And in this example, there were a 240% improvement in productivity. This one's similar. You've got the clocked hours in the salmon color trending down, and then the blue bars are the hours completed trending up, which is pretty nice if you're getting more done with fewer people. That's nice to have happen. And this one was 166% increase in productivity. In this graph, we have the clocked hours slightly trending up. You can see the dotted trend line here, but the hours completed, that trend line is much, much steeper. So an improvement of 236% in productivity. This one has the blue being the hours completed, the red being the clocked hours, the black line is the ratio of the two, and then the gray line is the trend line of the ratio. And in this case, there was an improvement in 165% in productivity. Again, we've got the blue bars, which indicate the hours completed, and the salmon color bars indicate the hours that were worked. And we have another case here where the hours worked is coming down while the hours completed is trending up for a 42% increase in productivity. This one is just showing the trend line of the hours completed by week, and it was a 200% improvement in productivity. Here is another example where the hours worked is on a slight trend up. The hours completed also on a trend up. The black line is the ratio of the two, and the black dotted line is the trend line on that ratio. And you can see a nice trend up on the ratio here, a 36% improvement in productivity. This one happens to be estimated hours completed by day. So the average at the start here, when the data starts, to the average of hours completed by day towards the end, a 333% improvement in productivity. This is total estimated hours completed by week. And you can see the improvement here. The dotted line is the trend line, but this is a 588% improvement in productivity. This one is showing jobs completed, and this is going from this average here. So the average jobs completed at the start versus the average jobs completed at the end is a 285% improvement in productivity. This one has the red bars are the hours available per week, so the hours, the clocked hours, the hours that people were there and available to work. The blue filled in part are the throughput dollars that were produced each week. And in this case, the average throughput dollars, where it was an increase of 400% average increase in throughput dollars. This one shows hours completed by day, and we're showing again a dotted blue trend line, but from the average at the beginning to the average at the end is a 55% increase in productivity. This one is showing hours completed again by day. The average at the beginning of the data to the average at the end of the data here is a 249% improvement in productivity. This one is similar with the orange dots by day, and then the dotted line showing the linear. And from the average from the beginning of the data to the average at the end of the data, 138% increase and productivity. We measured work in process as the number of hours in WIP. Shops started with 200 to way over 20,000 hours in process, and interestingly, it isn't always the biggest shops with the most WIP. The amount of WIP needed to optimize output is multifaceted, to say the least, particularly with all of the diversity and complexity that these shops have, but it is a deterministic number. WIP is a key part of the customization that each shop needs. Let's take a look at a few graphs. All the shops were required to count their WIP at the start of the program. All shops also track their WIP, but most shops don't graph it. However, it proved to be helpful in some cases, so here are a few of those graphs. In this case, you can see a mean reduction in WIP of about 95%. This one here is a reduction of WIP of 82%, and this one is a reduction of WIP of 97%. Due date performance was measured as the percent of jobs shipped that were on time or early. And while many shops were not tracking on-time delivery, most could determine their starting condition, which ranged from 20% to 95% on time. It's probably no surprise that many shops way oversold their capacity. So even though flow and productivity improved, it was still difficult to reach 100% on-time delivery in the cases where they had oversold their capacity. They had simply sold more than they could produce, even with improved flow and productivity. On-time delivery is an effect and a lagging indicator. To improve on-time delivery, we found it helpful to also measure days early and days late. Days late are the sum of the number of days late of the jobs that shipped on a day. For example, if 2 jobs were late and one is 10 days late and one is 5 days late, that would be a total of 15 days late. Days early are the sum of the days early of the jobs shipped on a day. And why do we care about shipping early? Because if we use capacity to work on jobs that are not yet needed, we may not have enough capacity for those that are due. Often we will see a reduction in days late before we see improvement in the on-time delivery percent. So let's look at a few of these graphs. We typically look at on-time delivery monthly. So here we can see an improvement of 7.6% in this first example. This one is 11.3 from here to here. Down here, the red line shows on-time delivery improvement of 157%. And this one shows 38.1%. Here's the summary data. Of the 442 shops that went through the program, the mean increase in on-time delivery was 42%. The mean increase in productivity was 198%. The mean reduction in WIP was 87%, and the mean reduction in lead time was 82%. Lead time is one of those measures that most were not measuring prior to the start of implementation. I suspect that if we had starting data for more of the shops, the improvement would be a little higher, but still not bad. The program that I developed helped shops to implement the key concepts in the goal, but that's really just the beginning. Some of those shops were given the opportunity to expand to a holistic implementation focused on the flow of money, as opposed to physical flow like we focused on in the previous program. The goal of this flow of money program was to add a minimum of 10% to the return on sales. So if they were currently making a 5% return on sales, we wanted to take them to 15% return on sales, an additional 10%. Let's look at some of those graphs. These graphs show their earnings before taxes as a percent of sales, so return on sales. In the upper left here, we went from a negative 7.3% return on sales to 19.8, a 371% increase. Here we go from 4.7% to 13.9, a 196% increase. This one from a negative 10.2% to 4.1%, a 140% increase. This graph went from a negative 3.2% return on sales to 17.9, so a 659% increase. This one from 0.26 to 10.71, a 971% increase. Down here, 0.2% to 10.9%, a 990% increase. Here we went from a negative 10% up to 32.1%, so a 421% increase. So far, all the shops have been able to add 10 percentage points or more to their return on sales. The percent mean increase in return on sales for the 21 shops that participated in increasing their flow of money was 521%. While that is impressive, all 442 shops should be praised. They took a leap of faith and took massive, fast action. Compiling this data has been really interesting. I knew that the shops we were working with were doing much better. I had no idea how much better. I had previously not looked at the improvements in terms of percent increase. It's one thing to say, for example, that lead times reduced from 30 days to 10 days, but for some reason it seems more impactful to recognize the 67% improvement. I was also surprised that the mean reduction in WIP was 87%. This means that only 13% of their WIP on average remained in process. That's amazing. All of these companies started by implementing the key concepts in the goal. Then some of those have gone beyond. As I said at the start, most TOC success stories are not holistic implementations. Most success stories are companies applying a little TOC to a portion of their company, and as it turns out, that's more than okay. It's impressive. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. It was my pleasure to present it. Thanks for watching.